Welcome to Unite and Win, a guide to workplace organizing, a podcast series by the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, presented in partnership with Haymarket Books. My name's Kim Kelly. Some of you may know me as Grim Kim online. I'm a labor journalist, lifelong metalhead, Philadelphia partisan, and author of 2 books on labor: Fight Like Hell, The Untold History of American Labor, and Fight to Win, Heroes of American Labor, the Young Readers Edition. Lately, I've been having some great conversations with labor organizers about their own experiences fighting like hell to organize their workplaces across industries, from education and media to fast food and nursing. These conversations are based on EWOC's Unite and Win handbook, which you heard our buddy Wes narrate. They're our way of digging into these lessons with real-world examples that help to illustrate just how much a union can help us accomplish when we come together and fight. Today, we're talking about charting our workplace and building an organizing committee from scratch with guests Kellen Gildersleeve and Troya Wright. Okay, it looks like we are ready for takeoff. So, to start things off, I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves to our audience, starting with Troya.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Troya Wright. My pronouns are anything said with love and respect. He, him is fine. And I have been organizing for over 10 years professionally, but right now I am a proud UE international representative. That's the United Electrical Radio and Machine Workers of America, as well as a Black Virginian.
And my name is Kellen Gildersleeve. My pronouns are she and they. And I currently work as a bedside registered nurse in labor and delivery here in Austin, Texas at a hospital. And I am also serving on our Professional Practice Committee, or our PPC, with my union, National Nurses United, or the National Nurses Organizing Committee. And we recently unionized our hospital just about 3 years ago now. And we are about 1.5 years into our first contract.
So you're both very well versed in all of this. And Troy, you've been around for a while. What got you here in the first place?
I think my connection to the labor movement began in approximately 2015. I was 25 years old. And I went through an apprenticeship program with the Center for Third World Organizing. And this apprenticeship program, they give you sort of a 1-week intensive of what organizing is, and then they send you off and place you with a workplace. And the one that was chosen for me being in Harlem, and I would be working with the RWDSU, which is a long, tenured union in warehouse workers and retail. And I spent most of my time looking like a hardcore punk kid from Virginia, organizing workers at Saks Fifth Avenue, Saks off Fifth, as well as other retail department store workers. After I did that, I found a real passion for not only organizing, but the idea that power is in the hands of the working class. So I made a 5-year plan and moved to Oakland to learn as much as I could from what I thought was the bleeding edge of organizing science, and then bring it back to Virginia. So now I'm here. I think the work that I did out there really led me to EWOC. Actually, my first entree into it was people mentioning this thing called EWOC. I'm like, okay, what is that? Well, you volunteer and they give you cases to organize with workers. So I said, that's exactly what I need, because I'm a true believer that organizers aren't some professionalized class that you go to school and you learn how to organize, but it is an amalgamation of the tools that we learn through differences in campaigns and all types of experiences, locations, times, places, and conditions, and being able to pull from your toolbox to be creative when it comes to campaigns and winning them. So I think I've been volunteering with EWOC for over 2 years now, and doing so many campaigns supporting intermediate organizers that I literally have what I call staff meetings with the people that I'm supporting. So yeah, that's a snapshot.
Man, and Kellen, what's your superhero origin story?
Well, it's amazing to hear about Troya's activism and experience with organizing over the past several years, because as somebody who's relatively new, it's going to be a vastly different experience. So it's cool that we're both here talking about those different perspectives. But I got into labor organizing in a serious fashion in 2020. Obviously, as a nurse, the pandemic started to change the tone at my workplace. And for a long time, I had been interested in organizing and had attempted some initial conversations that just didn't go well. But when I heard that tone shift, that anchor being directed towards management specifically, I was like, I think this is an opportunity for us to try to capture this energy and fix some of the problems that we've been having with staffing and retention. And so I contacted National Nurses United. They set me up with a staff organizer and we started having conversations. It happened that in 2020 is also whenever I had my son. And so that allowed me to, while I was on maternity leave, have some space to gear up and plan for what I was going to do when I came back from maternity leave in regards to organizing. And I took the EWOC 101 training on maternity leave and ended up coming back with a renewed energy. Like, yes, I still had my staff organizer that was helping guide me, but I also understood the trajectory where we were going. And I had some chances to do those mock conversations in that training, which I think was really helpful as well. So I feel like EWOC was so instrumental in helping build my confidence that once we got our own union underway, I definitely wanted to see how I could give back to the EWOC movement. So I'm very proud to be involved in any way with EWOC and the labor organizing movement.
I've been to Austin a bunch, not recently. I've been there for punk shows and metal shows and, the weird Austin's what I remember. But you're doing this organizing in Texas, which obviously does have a really feisty and established labor movement, but comes up a lot of roadblocks, including the fact that it's a so-called right to work state. And I'm interested in hearing about how when you're getting involved in this organizing and talking to your coworkers and building your committees and getting, the nitty-gritty steps going, how did that backdrop influence the kind of work you were doing in this very personal profession against the backdrop too of this horrifying pandemic that you guys were dealing with in a very visceral way?
Yeah, so it's interesting because Austin is what a lot of people consider to be like a blue dot in a red lake. There are a lot of people who consider themselves to be liberal. And so I was thinking, even though Texas in general is conservative, Austin is going to maybe be more supportive of this idea of unionizing. And while I did find that, our more liberal-leaning colleagues were a little bit more ready to hear information about the union, they still did require quite a bit of education and still had similar levels of misinformation and confusion. I had some people tell me that they thought it was illegal to start a union in Texas, which is kind of what ends up being a cultural myth regarding right to work. It seems like people say, oh, right to work means that I can get fired anytime, which means that you can't even start a union. And the reality is that it's just a barrier. And you do have to have your organizing conversations with that in mind, letting people know hey, in a right to work state, you are not required to be a member of this union. Here's how it is going to benefit you, and here's how it's going to benefit our profession. Trying to come at things from a firm but polite perspective can be really helpful. I think in the South, you have to use your manners a little bit more than you might in other places, especially with nurses, a lot of whom are white conservatives. Also, there are many other demographics of nurses in Austin, and I'll tell you, people from our migrant nurse communities and our Black nurses are a little bit more immediately understanding of why the union is necessary because they just have more of that experience with those direct conditions. So it was amazing that we were able to win with 72% yes votes in Texas. I think that's a big testament to our organizing program. But yeah, we never were we got this. At any point, we were always we got to push forward because of that climate that we were working in.
And Troy, I can see you nodding. The audience can't. You've organized in New York and in California and in Virginia. And those are all very different places to be doing this type of work. I would love to hear your thoughts on what Kellen was just talking about.
I think it's particularly important for us to remember that there are differences in place, time, and conditions when we're thinking about organizing campaigns and the sciences that we use to tackle them. For me, the reason I left Virginia is also the reason I came back. It's that, of course, it's the capital of the Confederacy, right? The South is a sort of different place and condition. The times are similar, though, right? So when Kellen was talking about this cultural myth of right to work, we experience a similar thing here, specifically because right now the work that I do and concentrate on is the public sector workers in Virginia. It's a place called Hampton Roads, 757 as others call it. We are this, what I call one of the main centers of the military industrial complex, which is 50-50 public and private, basically. We are the home of entertainers like Pharrell and Missy Elliott and the Clips and stuff like that. But we're also the home of sort of this battleground in between the North and the South of right to work and workers' rights. So we all similarly know the history of Jim Crow and Martin Luther King being assassinated when he was standing up for sanitation workers, public sector workers, right? The right to work laws coming in shortly after, and their sort of racial undertones. But when you've experienced the sort of union density and culture that is developed in places like New York and California, where folks wear their unions on their chest, and you'll see seas of purple and gold and unions really coming together to show each other solidarity, we can learn from those histories and how they got there and realize that we have to take different steps to get where we need to be in places like Virginia and Austin. So learning from the history of the NNOC and Ed Bruno and how they took the union card out of the development of an organization like that and moved towards building a network of nurses that fought for each other and their conditions is another piece of the history, the theory necessary in order to successfully do the practice is really important to places in the South, right? How do we leave the union card for later and start developing the solidarity necessary for folks to act like a union in a place where unions are frowned upon, where union is a bad word since you were in middle school? I think another learning from organizing across the country, working for different unions and working for nonprofits and unionizing my own nonprofit at, Mothers Out Front, is everyone comes to the table with different sort of issues. And the main piece of the puzzle that all of them have in common, whether North or South, Nevada or Atlanta, is an organizing committee that is strong and that understands, like Kellen was saying, the bigger picture of where a campaign is going. And oftentimes with non-majority unionism or organizing in places like the South or among folks that are seen as minorities, we think that we can skip that process. And that's one of the things that's, really close to my heart, not skipping that part of the process and being very scientific about what we mean by when we talk about diversity. We're not talking about the amount of people with different skin colors and orientations in your OC. We're talking about power. So that's another thing that I've learned from being across the country, as well as organizing now in Virginia and across the South to make sure that Southern workers are a part of this labor movement, because of the centrality of the types of industries that are based here, from military industrial complex to electric car infrastructures and data centers. If you want to stop a war, the workers have the power to do that. And we can learn that from history. So how do we strategically use our organizing acumen to really get at what we're trying to do?
Unite and Win is presented in partnership with Haymarket Books, publisher of a wide range of essential radical books that are especially relevant to listeners like you. One that you might be interested in reading is Detroit, I Do Mind Dying, A Study in Urban Revolution by Dan Georgakis and Marvin Sergin, one of my personal favorites. In this classic work of radical history, Sirkin and Georgakis traced the extraordinary development of the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement and the League of Revolutionary Black Workers as they became two of the landmark political organizations of the 1960s and 1970s. Widely heralded as one of the most important books on the Black liberation movement of that era, Detroit, I Do Mind Dying remains a vital and illuminating addition to the library of any reader interested in the history of anti-racist class struggle in the U.S. and the antecedents to the forces recomposing the labor movement today. Find Detroit, I Do Mind Dying at haymarketbooks.org, where all paperback books are 20% off every day. You have so much experience organizing, yes, in labor, but also, like you said, in other aspects of the struggle. You're formerly with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. And that made so much sense to me why you would be working with workers, because there's sometimes in, I guess, the broader space of people trying to make the world a little bit better, there's this inclination to kind of put people into buckets. Like, this is the worker struggle. This is the food sovereignty and food insecurity struggle. This is queer and trans struggle. This is women. This is Black folks. And it's all connected, right? Anytime you're at a march, anytime you're at action, all the same people that are coming out, against the predatory real estate company or against the genocide in Gaza, they're probably going to work the next day. It's all interconnected. And when you're talking about building that OC, that organizing committee, and identifying those leaders and those kind of common ground issues that will bring people together in a deeper way, I'd love to hear from both of you just about what that looks like in more practical terms. How are we identifying these big issues in these specific instances that pull people together? How are we identifying the potential leaders or like the linchpins of those committees, even if they don't see themselves as a leader, even if they don't see themselves as a public voice? In your case, how did you identify the people that you really wanted to get involved when you're starting to organize and get your committee together?
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we were identifying leaders, a lot of it was a necessity to get into individual units. So hospitals, like many workplaces, are very siloed, but you all are working under very similar conditions, and often you don't know it. And so our initial way of identifying leaders was just going and having any conversation with anyone in these units that we didn't have contact in. And then once we started having a dialogue, then we could ask, like, who are the people who are asking like the really good questions at the staff meetings? Like, who are people who are pushing back against policies that they're concerned are going to negatively affect their patients? And also, who is close to management? Because sometimes those people are the same people. And so we had to have some very careful conversations with them to ensure that their friendship with the manager, for instance, wasn't going to get in the way with what they felt was right. We also just had to have issues-based conversations with people to know where we could steer our asks. So we knew that people cared about retention and pay. We knew that people cared about safe nurse-to-patient ratios, meaning one nurse is not going to have too many patients to care for appropriately. But we wanted to have specific conversations with people about what was happening on their unit. And in terms of figuring out who was going to be a leader or not, often in a place where you're starting a union, it's going to be the people who just show up. And then from there, you might have to plant a seed, especially for those really busy people, especially for those moms, to be like, hey, I know you're really busy. In what way can we get you involved? Because I'm hearing like some really important ideas from you. But yeah, in a place where you're starting a new union, that leadership identification also has to come with a lot of hyping up and making people not give in to their imposter syndrome when it comes to organizing or doing something new in general, but especially organizing, which can seem really scary. And then in terms of diversity, I think the most important thing for us was just having people from different backgrounds, economically especially, because we were finding that a lot of the people who were showing up for the OC were definitely from more privileged backgrounds because they were not having to live outside of town and do an hour commute to get into the hospital. So it made it harder for our fellow nurses who lived far away to become involved. So we did a lot of like Zoom organizing so that those people could be involved. I'd love to hear what Troya has to say about including and identifying leaders from different backgrounds.
Yeah, that's a big question, one that I struggle with, and that's why that creativity is necessary, as well as like having conversations with other organizers. Seeing yourself as one, as a activist and a leader in the workplace is one of the first important steps, and I'm thankful for EWOP for helping you get there, Kellen. So when we talk about developing an OC, we have to keep a couple of things in mind. One is the people that are necessary. Another one is mapping. And I think a final one is the role of an organizer in those spaces. We often struggle as organizers to get across to even our own families, our own partners, what an organizer does. So having an understanding as an organizer, whether you're a leader in the workplace or a staff organizer, conveying that role is extremely important to developing an OC, because the OC is the one that is leading the struggle, that can identify the issues, that can be in those spaces, that can be relational with the other workers that you're trying to bring into the struggle, so that the organizer can't do that. And the job of an organizer is not to go do everything, even when you're in that workplace, not to do everything, not to lead every meeting. Your job is to bring those tools that you have in your toolbox to everyone else. Not everyone may be able to use the screwdriver the same as other folks, but at least they have an understanding of what the screwdriver does now. They might not be the one tasked with using it. But as an organizer, you're supposed to see small glimpses of leadership and turn the knob up in order to get a robust, organized, and capable organizing committee that can move quickly and attentively to the issues of the strategic constituency, right? And when we say strategic constituency, you might have a whole base of workers, but there are folks that are more strategic to your goal of getting a union, right? So who, if they throw their body on the gears of this machine, would shut down the machine? So when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about allowing accessibility to all the leaders that you find, just like Kellen was talking about. And our OC may be made up of 10% of workers from each department, but if you have more percent of workers from the department that if they should stop working, it'll shut this whole thing down, you have an even stronger OC. And that's what we mean when we talk about diversity in a scientific sense, right? What is that balance? It doesn't have to be completely equal in all buckets, but you need a stronger concentration of the space that is going to be the most tactically advantageous. When it comes to staffing levels, historical struggles, and structure tests, right? When we were identifying these issues and acting on them, one of the most important tools for me through any organizing is what they call shop floor issues. And that's how you can identify leaders by, just like Kellen was saying, who is the one speaking up in the all staff meetings, who is not afraid of the boss, and who is ready to take action towards making those changes. Is the workers acting like a union before you have it, right? You know, we're not encouraging people to walk out and picket and say, oh, we're a union because we say we are yet. But we have to realize that the union is not a law. Organizing is the sword and law is the shield, as we're seeing with the NLRB being, gutted and public sector workers losing even more rights that they already didn't have. We realize that the wins that we struggle for through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s are only powerful if we continue to flex our organizing muscle. And in every case, the only power that workers have is the ability to withhold their labor. So enacting structure tests at the appropriate level to see where people are they resonating with your issues? Are they actually building what they call the socialize before you organize part, so that people see themselves in the others that they're taking action with? Are they going to wear stickers on a sticker day? They're going to wear shirts on a shirt day? Are they going to sign the petition with their name spelled out instead of a signature that the boss won't be able to read? Are different levels of measurement that are necessary for an OC to see their work working, as well as for the campaign to move forward. So when we're developing an OC, I believe the most important part of it is that they have the reins and the understanding of the tools that they'll be using, and be a school for the workers to learn about how power functions and how to organize that power.
So, looking ahead to the many struggles ahead in the climate we're in, under the administration we're in the regions you're in, and the state the country's in, as organizers, what is kind of giving you hope going forward? And what kind of organizing strategies do you think will be most effective as we go forward?
I have seen such a massive awakening, not only in my workplace, and the union has really been an awakening moment for a lot of my coworkers, but just also in my social life, in my family life, and on social media. I do see that there are more people who are trying to get into the material analysis of why they're so miserable. And I am really heartened that it seems like a lot of people want to do something about it because there's a lot of evidence that whenever you do just one little thing to move the needle, that it can help you stay sane. We talk about this a lot in the medical field regarding moral injury. Whenever you are working under a system that is incompatible with your values, and that causes moral injury every day. And that's really majorly huge in the medical system, which is obviously not a healthcare system. It's a profit generating system. And so what you do whenever you're incurring that moral injury is you can fight back by improving conditions for yourself and for your patients. And that will help protect you and help heal you to an extent. And then also, I do believe that most people care about each other, especially if they work together. Even if they don't like each other, they still care about what happens to each other despite disagreements about strategy. So those are the things that are giving me hope right now. And it's still really hard to feel that hope many, many days. And I try to remind myself as much as I can, because otherwise I am an ineffective organizer. And whatever I can do to get out of that catatonic state and make a phone call, an organizing phone call, is important for me to do, even if I don't always feel like it.
I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, that organizers are people who are also living in this world, living under these pressures, who love other people who are being crushed in the gears of this machinery. Like, give yourself a little credit. And Troya, some final thoughts from you here?
Hope is a strong word. I'm not as apathetic to it as, in previous years, but I can compare this moment to a 2016 where everyone thought the world was going to end. But in that moment, I think we saw the growth that was necessary to make us stronger for a moment like this. Power isn't about what's legal. The boss does things that are illegal to you every day. The country does things that are illegal for international law every day, right? It's about power. And folks are looking for an answer to power now that in my short lifetime, I have not experienced. So that for me really, really gives me hope. The apathy that it has drowned our generations is finally starting to be lifted from us, I think. But what's necessary to get out of that apathy is for us not to just tell people that organizing makes a difference, that, the working class has the necessity to not only understand how the world works, but change it. And we can. I think it's really making a difference. Organizations like EWOC, because giving folks the on-ramps into the movement is really important, and making sure that folks have a place and understand their roles in those movements and those on-ramps is really important to getting them to a higher level of understanding that gets folks out of that apathy that we've been talking about. I think the other piece that really gives me revolutionary optimism, as it were, is folks are better at placing the blame today. In times like 2016 or 2008, 2001, folks would place the blame on other things. They would blame international terrorism and we need to be closer together as a country, or it's because we haven't had any black presidents is the problem, or Donald Trump is going to put me in a concentration camp, instead of blaming what the internet now is calling the Epstein class, which, scientists call the bourgeoisie, which organizers call the struggle for power. So having folks place the blame and seeing it as a bigger picture is a big difference for me on a wider scale. Maybe just because it's on the internet, maybe because I live in a bubble, but we can even see spaces on what people call the right looking a bit further into where the blame needs to be and taking that action that make the change. So lastly, I'll say the awakening of the traditional business unions that they can't lean on a couple cents every contract to keep their membership okay. And now realizing that they have to actually take action and link the workplace to the political in order for them to actually be making movements and correcting the issues of the AFL-CIO in the past, if I'm being honest. So hopefully seeing more of that is what really gives me hope.
Amen to that. Thank you both so much for spending a little time with us today and sharing your insights and your stories. I'm so grateful I got to be here for this conversation. And for anyone who's out there listening, you've got your homework. Let's get to work. Thanks for listening to Unite and Win, a guide to workplace organizing from the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee and Haymarket Books. Visit haymarketbooks.org to find indispensable radical books, podcasts, virtual events, and other political education resources, including the Unite and Win handbook. Please also consider joining the Haymarket Book Club. It's one of the best ways to support Haymarket and help fund projects like this one. I'm your host, Kim Kelly. Julia Yort is our senior producer, and Rachel Leitner is our engineer. Production support comes from Daphna Tier and Megan Swoboda. Music from Epidemic Sound. Listen to Unite and Win, a guide to workplace organizing, wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you heard, show us some love by subscribing, rating, or reviewing our series. 5 stars, please. It would also be pretty cool of you to share it with a friend, a coworker, or a fellow troublemaker who just might benefit from a little inspiration. Solidarity forever and lots of love. Your pal, Kim.
The Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee supports any worker, anywhere in the country, in any sector, organizing for something better. Visit us at workerorganizing.org if you're ready to organize your workplace or volunteer with us. Please also consider making a donation in support of our work at workerorganizing.org/donate.